Right, ladies and gentlemen, I've just been informed that we have gone live, so we will start the meeting. So welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Cabinet. And I'll start off with the evacuation procedure, as there are members of the public present who might not be aware. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm does sound, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once out of the building, please gather outside the Lloyds Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door by which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you need any assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourself known to a member of staff. Please also make sure that your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent. I would also advise that our meeting is being live streamed and will be recorded for future broadcast. That moves us on to agenda item number 2, which is apologies, and all the members of Cabinet are present. Agenda item number 3, which is declarations of interest. Do any Cabinet members have any declarations which aren't already printed on the agenda? No, thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 4, which is the minutes of the last meeting of the 8th of February. Are Cabinet happy that I sign them off as a true and accurate record of the last meeting? Okay, thank you. That moves us on to agenda item number 5, which is public consultation. I have been advised that we have speakers on agenda item number 7, which is a general fund budget monitoring report for Mrs. Michelle Condacor and Ian Colvert, and I have a note here to say specifically in relation to page 36. On item number 9, which is the capital monitoring 22-23, again, Mrs. Condacor, and agenda item number 13, which is exclusion of the public and press. Again, that is Mrs. Condacor who wishes to speak on that. And I would remind all members of the public who wish to speak that they should be speaking to the specific agenda item which they have asked to speak on. If they fail to stick to the agenda, I will remind them to do so. If they fail to do so, then I will move on with the business of the meeting. Okay. I will take things in the order that they are printed on the agenda, so that leads me to agenda item number 6, which is the procurement and accounts payable strategy. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We're seeking approval for our, as you say, for our procurement and AP strategy. We do need to renew it. It's up for renewal in 2023. And while we are restricted by statute and by the contract procurement rules, we very much designed this with an eye on value for money for the taxpayer, because we are acutely aware of the supply chain and the inflationary pressures that we are facing. So it's been put together by our splendid creditors manager, and we'll be following up very shortly with a no PO, no pay policy. But I shall move the report, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Markham, thank you. I have no public speakers, so any non-cabinet member? No non-cabinet member wishes to speak. So we'll move swiftly to the vote then. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Okay, thank you. That is carried. So we then move on to agenda item number 7, which is the General Fund Revenue Budget Monitoring 22-23, Quarter 3. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This updates our budget position to the end of January. It's very similar to what we presented in February at the Budget Council. The drift from the 22-23 budget appears to have stabilised. We're about £900,000 in deficit, and we will obviously try to bring that down as we bring the accounts into land at year end. Otherwise, I shall move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Croft, and I will second that from the Chair. I have 2 speakers on this, the first of which is Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. I mean, the first comment I really want to make is on the car parking. That's the biggest sort of problem area in terms of not getting the income that you're expecting. And I just want to know, I know you say you can't ask questions and things, but why was there nothing in last month's budget to help mitigate that? On other things in this report, the delay in renting the top floor of the town hall, when you suggested about raising income from rental and things, I asked, this was back in December 21, whether it was realistic, and I was rather dismissed and had to go up, but it seems that it is a genuine issue. And budget time, you didn't take up the Green suggestion of improving the windows, etc., to make things much more rentable and attractive to people. Vacant properties, again, are mentioned as, a drop in income. And it says that, I think it said 33,000, sorry, I haven't got the paper in front of me. But when I've looked to see what properties are vacant on the website, there are only 4 mentioned on the council website, and the income from those adds up to 11,352. So are there other properties that aren't on the website? And if not, why not? Because if someone is looking to rent a property, surely you need to have it really well up front as to where they can be getting it. On 4.12, I just wonder, the thing about the developers paying for bins, is that only able to be applied for developments approved after that decision was made? And the money, the 57,000 for bin placements, does that include costs of things like replacement caddies? Because the last recycling collection we had, when we pulled our bin back in, the paper caddy was missing, and so the council said, oh yes, we'll replace that. Surely that, if that's the bin collectors are throwing them into the lorry with the paper, as well as being an issue in that it contaminates the whole of the load, are the company, which, Coventry City Council who run that, are they being charged when the council has to replace those? Other little bits, did the income on 4.17, the income that was got from when the Civic Hall was a vaccination centre, the implication from what was written suggests to me that the charges that were made to them did not totally cover the overheads. I mean, I may have misconstrued that, but that's how I read it. So I wonder whether it did actually, were they charged the right amount? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Condacore. Any points of clarification from members of Cabinet? Councillor Croft?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly on that last point. On, was it 4.17, the additional cost is because they terminated the contract early. It wasn't that we'd budgeted for a full year's income. So obviously, if the contract ends early, we will have additional costs. What we expect, that's the way it's presented.
That wasn't, strictly speaking, a point of clarification on what she said. That was a point of debate, but it answered the point which would have been answered anyway. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Croft. That moves us on to Mr. Colvert.
Apologies if I get Kate's name wrong. I know she did say it to me earlier. But at a previous meeting, when we were talking about the closure of the Bedworth Civic Hall and the NHS moving out of it, obviously costs will be incurred in maintaining the building until a decision is finally made what happens with it. When Kevin Hollis seemed to be running things, I did raise a question at a previous cabinet meeting or an OSP meeting asking what the timetable of events were and whether this was being undertaken as a procurement. My concern is the costs that are going to be racked up in nothing happening.
Mr. Colvert, this isn't, strictly speaking, on the agenda item itself. This is a report back on Q3, not on future activity of the council.
Well, it was raised under the previous question. I did ask, with the costs that are being generated in the building being left empty and the loss of the revenue of the NHS, is there a figure that is being put aside, and if so, how long for? Because we did ask
Mr. Colvert, that is the budget 23-24, not the budget 22-23.
I did ask if we could discuss the question about the timetable of events, because
Mr. Colvert, that isn't on the agenda. Please stick to the agenda, which is about what happened in Q3 of financial year 22-23.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Colvett. I don't think there are any points of clarification because it wasn't, strictly speaking, relevant to the agenda item in question. So I'll move on to any non-Cabinet member who wishes to speak. Councillor Condacall.
Evening, Chair. £900,000 is an immensely large deficit. It's about 4 climbing walls, if we talk about it in terms of things that have gone wrong at this council. And half of it, you could easily say, wasn't the council's fault. It didn't know about the war, it didn't know about various things. But I think, quite rightly, we can put some of it as being predictable. We knew the parking charges were crazy and weren't effective. This £1.50 for 3 hours is very good value in the road walk, but that policy is not working. And so I ask in year, can we still look at being more creative over our parking charges? Because the deficit on parking is massive. The closure of Abbey Street car park has been disastrous. And we have a very large number of empty shops and businesses which would appreciate some action taken, not only to raise our revenues by having smarter parking charges, but actually getting more footfall in the town centre. We have a lot of issues around the Abbey Street development, and it's not clear in the Q3 how much revenue costs there are from some of the projects, or if they're entirely capitalised. So it might be useful if on the progress reports for these budgets, we had some more detail about some of the development projects and economic development activities, because although some of it gets, like the big bits, like building a hotel, a capital, some of the activities like marketing and stuff will be revenue. And I'm most concerned about the size of this deficit. And one of the other things that has added to it was the council tax base. As you know, every year we predict how many houses will get built, how many people have extensions, how many people will be claiming various benefits and reducing the council tax. And we got that seriously wrong for this year's finances, which is why we're only predicting 18 new houses effectively for the council tax base next year. And I really hope we can do something about that. Thank you, Chair.
Any points of clarification on Councillor Condacall? No. I think... Oh, sorry. Councillor Beetham.
So this is just my statement on it, not point of clarification from Mr. Condacall. It's just in regards to Appendix 1. I was just wondering, for clarity, as I've had a few residents query, that the charges in regards to the museum, that only occurs that if it's not a staff-led and that it's outside the hours for the proposed fee. That's all.
Thank you for that, Councillor Beetham. So I think there are a few things I'd like to pick up on that, on what's been said. If I just find my notes, I wrote them down somewhere, on things which were picked up. So it's interesting that Mrs. Condacall goes on about the windows, spending £950,000 on just windows for the town hall is not good value for money and would not be in keeping with the wishes and feelings and priorities of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. They want it spent on frontline services or actually getting this council more modern and fit for purpose and able to deliver in the 21st century. Just look around at this room, just this room alone, at the glass. It is, I would probably venture to say, almost all original from when the building was created. And it is a fine example of its time. And there are numerous pieces of glass in there. And are we suggesting that we convert all of this into UPVC? No. In my office alone, there are 20 panes of glass which would need replacing or changing.
Can I just clarify, please?
No, Mrs. Condacall, you know the rules. You've been here many years now.
But you're misconstruing
Mrs. Condacall, that is not in keeping with what residents really want their money spending on. We also have the issue that with car parking charges, yes, we have kept car parking charges at £1.50, and many residents are happy that we're keeping car parking charges at £1.50. Yes, there was a forecasting issue because recovery wasn't as great from the COVID pandemic that we wanted to see, and that has been adjusted for in the budget for 23-24. And actually, Councillor Condacore knows that what he said is incorrect because I reported it to him at an overview and scrutiny panel and highlighted to him that the dwell time in the town centre has increased by about 50%. That is the reality. That is what the metrics are showing us, that people are staying longer in the town centre. That is exactly what we want them to do. We want them to enjoy themselves, go and do their shopping, perhaps now have time to go get a cup of coffee, cup of tea, a panini, meet up with their friends, and spend money in the borough with the very businesses that he proclaims that he wants to help and protect. So no, we aren't going to take his suggestion about a backward step on the budget in that regard. And with respect to Abbey Street, yes, it is difficult and unfortunate that the car park there is out of commission. That is because we are embarking on a transformation of Nuneaton Town Centre, something which he gate-crashed, by the way, for the launch, something which he proclaims to have grave reservations and talks down at almost every single opportunity he has. He then gate-crashes the very launch where the people here were excited about what was going on, about the future of Nuneaton Town Centre and what that can bring. Mrs Condacore, no, you know the rules.
But you're saying things that are incorrect.
I'm not. He gate-crashed the meeting. I was there.
But you said at the full council meeting,
Mrs
you
Condacore, I
announced
will warn you once more, if you carry on, you won't be allowed to speak on any further agenda items.
You announced it at full council, and then you were surprised when people turned up. I thought it was a general public thing. I very nearly came down with it.
one more warning. Do it again, and there will be no further public speaking from you this evening. You accuse us of being childish. Right. So I think, actually, given the fact that we've had some very challenging circumstances in 22-23, we've done a remarkable job, given the national situation and international situation that we have had to contend with. Anything from any other Cabinet member? No? In which case, we will move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendations, please show. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 8, which is the HRA account. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is the same drill as the previous report, but for the HRA, only we are underspent by about approximately £750,000, largely due to our old friend project slippage and vacancy savings, but also because we had some very prudent budgeting on rental income last year, and we've updated the ledger to reflect the actuals, so that's put us in a much better position. But other than that, I shall move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Golby, thank you very much. Any non-Cabinet member? Councillor Condacore.
Chair, underspending can be one of two things. You can either be doing things better, or you can be doing less stuff. Or, actually, you can have more income. We've actually had quite a fortunate income outcome for housing. But one of the things we are failing to do is some of the jobs around some of our estates. We stopped the estate walkabouts. The grounds maintenance is virtually non-existent on lots of places in my ward, and I assume many other wards. Thank you, Councillor Croft. Councillor Guttridge. The maintenance is really appalling. I was at Carisbrook yesterday, and there's been nothing done. There's still bags of fly tipping there. It's been there for 3 years. And the estate walkabouts aren't happening. So whilst you are happy there's an underspend, we are actually under-delivering on some of our services. And some of the particular leaseholders who are actually paying fees for ground maintenance work to happen, it's just not being done. So I think the problem we've got is actually we're not getting on top of these jobs. And our residents deserve, if they're paying rent or if they're leaseholders, lease payments, etc., to have a better level of service, whilst we'd still have a surplus. It's great we've got a surplus, but actually we do need to be doing the jobs properly and spending what we need to on the level of service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Condacourt. Any points of clarification? No? Any Cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Golby?
Thank you, Chair. It's extremely unfair that this keeps happening, because every time Councillor Kandaka makes a claim that my team are not doing things, I get one of my team to contact you. I ask Councillor Kandaka what has he logged through customer services, and do you know what the answer always is? Nothing. So you sit here and you criticise the teams for not doing their jobs. They are doing their jobs, and if they're not doing their jobs, I will happily rectify that. However, you provide no evidence, and you do not go through customer services when my teams contact you, which they will be doing tomorrow, because believe it or not, they actually watch this. So they'll be contacting you tomorrow, and you can tell them which customer services calls that you've logged and which areas you are complaining about today, which they will go out and they will deal with should there be an issue. It's extremely unfair that they have no right to reply in all of this, and they get disparaged constantly in this chamber by that man with absolutely no basis whatsoever. So I'm not willing to put up with this anymore, as you might have realised from things that have gone on today. I'm not willing to keep quiet on things anymore. My team are doing a really good job in what is quite challenging circumstances, and the constant belittling of them publicly is not good, and I won't tolerate it anymore. So if you've got problems, that's fine. They will work with you if you can do it through legitimate process. You are not doing it through legitimate process. Do it through legitimate process, and we will have some metrics to follow up. That's all we're asking. And even when they contact you directly, you never actually contact them back. Or if you do, it's nothing like what you've announced in this chamber. So I'm not willing to have my staff put down anymore. Thank you.
There is no such thing as a right of reply. There is no such thing as a right of reply, Councillor Condacourt. Councillor Condacourt, I'll give you the same warning I gave your wife. If you carry on, you won't be permitted to speak on any further agenda items. You know that actually allowing any other councillor to speak is at my discretion, which isn't actually within the rules, but I do it because I want councillors to speak within the bounds of what's being said. I think it's also important to note, actually, that we do have a shortage of tradesmen on a number of areas, and when we were going through the budget setting process and looking specifically line by line at each and every single job vacancy in this authority, a number of those vacancies are within the housing revenue account and specifically to do with tradesmen. And that is, well, if I'm being politically correct, tradespeople. And that is a national issue, again, that there are problems securing plumbers, plasterers, carpenters, etc., which are required to do a number of the jobs. So to one extent, I agree with Councillor Condacourt that it is unfortunate that we aren't able to do the jobs that we would like to do, but I cannot magic the carpenters, the plumbers, the plasterers, etc. up out of thin air. Now, hopefully, there will be people out there who will want to train to do that, because some of them earn a lot of money, actually, and we are subcontracting out where we can. But we have to give way to the economic and job realities that we face. If we could, we would, and Councillor Golby knows full well that she has the whole of Cabinet support, that if it is legitimate spend within budget, we want it spent for the benefit of our residents. But I cannot do things if I haven't got the people there. And as I say, we went through things line by line in the budget process, painfully, as some officers might have thought, because we were questioning every single thing to make sure we were being careful with residents' money. Any other Cabinet member wish to speak on that? No? In which case we will move... Sorry, Mr. Colvert, you haven't put down to speak on this. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 9, which is the Capital Monitoring Report. Councillor Croft.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This updates us on the capital programme to the third quarter of the financial year that is just about to end. The two things to note are we are underspent on the capital programme. That is as a result of, like I say, project slippage, trying to procure in an inflationary environment with the supply chain issues we've had. That's not necessarily a positive thing, has been alluded to, because while we might have a surplus in this year, it does mean that we might be building up a glut of work for future years, so we know we need to keep on top of that, but we're very alive to that. And the other main headline from the report is that we have updated it to include additional projects that we've decided to take on, so the SPF money, the splendid work that Councillor Guttridge has done on Buttermere Park, and so on. So I shall move the report, Leader.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croft. And I will second that from the Chair. I have one public speaker, Mrs Condacor.
Thank you. Just a few comments. 4.8, the homeless hostel conversion. It's concerning that the building was bought and there doesn't seem to be adequate funding for its conversion, and it's not gone to proper scrutiny. So it just was a very poorly planned decision, and it's just sitting there, and it's obviously costing us money to look after it and what have you in the meantime. So that needs to really get moved forward. I don't know what the solution is if you haven't got the money, but it'll have to come from somewhere, because otherwise are you going to just sell the building on again? 4.9, the removal of the lily pad fountain. I've spoken about this before. I'm very unhappy about it happening, as are lots of others. The cost there is now quoted at 35,000 when it was previously, I think it was 40,000. So I don't know how accurate that is if when they start doing the work, are they going to find all sorts of things? Is it going to cost more? What's going to be thing? What alternative provision is being provided for seating in the area? We've seen no plans whatsoever. What things have been put in place to ensure that the antisocial behaviour that you're using to justify removing it does simply not move somewhere else? There are a lot of unanswered questions, and I think it should actually be put on hold until such time as you can actually answer these questions, because it's not good practice from what I've seen. And 5.2, it says, at this stage, only one of the projects is known to have resulted in larger costs through tender. Now, at least two of those projects, 2 of the 5 projects that were mentioned, are on pause, and that's the Bedworth Physical Activity Hub and the homeless hostel, because the tenders for that, for the work, came out too high. So I don't know, presuming the activity hub is also larger cost through tender, but there are 2 of those projects. And also, with the way that things are going up, the extra things that have been added into the capital programme, which are claimed to be fully funded from Section 106 or grant funds and things, is there a risk that those are going to also go over the budget that's been allowed for, and more money will have to be found to actually complete them?
Any points of clarification of what Mrs Condacor has said? No. Any non-cabinet member? Councillor Condacor.
Chair, the level of underspend on the capital budget, if you look at table on 4.5, is £50 million. That must be equivalent to about, how many, 15, 16 Gresham roads? This is an astronomical amount of underspend. And in some ways that's good, because we didn't have the ability to borrow that 50 million or even our half of it, or whatever our part funding is. So the slippage on the capital programme is actually in part saving us from an almighty cash flow crisis, or borrowing at a time when interest rates are ridiculously high. But some of this spending will actually save us money, and it's stuff we're really keen on getting on with, like housing shelters and things. There is stuff in our capital programme which, if it had been delivered on time, will then give us revenue savings or revenue income. And we also have, like the Bridge to Living scheme, where we've chucked businesses out of the town centre to actually redevelop, and then the project is running late. So we're sat with more and more empty shops in the town centre. This is a disaster. On the lily pad, the lily pad fountain is supposed to go to scrutiny tomorrow night, and I think that's now been pulled. But we do need to know what's going in its place. I'm not a particular fan of the fountain, but if we're spending the 35,000 in this prosperity fund to remove it, are we spending £5,000 to put some benches back and some paving? What are we doing? This is why we need scrutiny of this capital programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Condacor. Anyone wish to come back on what Councillor Condacor has said? No? In which case we'll move to the recommendations as printed. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. That then moves us on to agenda item number 10, which is the Resource and Waste Strategy Consultation. Councillor Markham.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the Warwickshire Waste Partnership joint responses to the Government's consultation on the Resource and Waste Strategy with regards to the new proposals to extend producer responsibility, deposit return schemes and consistent collections. I'll just summarise the actual findings of the consultations. For the deposit return scheme, it would see a deposit added to the price of drinks in-scope drinks containers at the point of purchase, which would be redeemed when consumers return their empty drinks containers to designated return points. And we anticipate that this will help reduce the amount of littering, boost recycling levels and promote recycling through clear labelling and consumer messaging. The extended producer responsibility, businesses will be incentivised to reduce unnecessary and difficult to recycle packaging and to design and use packaging that is recyclable. Businesses will bear the full net cost of managing the packaging they handle or place on the market at end of life. This should include the cost of collection, recycling, disposal, the clear-up of littering and fly-tipped packaging, and communications relating to recycling and tackling littering. And the consistency of collections, that's because basically members of the public are often confused about what their local authority collects for recycling and by sometimes complex bin rules and inconsistencies. Consultation on the proposals for all waste collections authorities to collect the same core set of dry recyclable materials from households. So that's the result of those. So I'll move the report as printed, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Markham. Does that receive a seconder? Councillor Gutteridge, thank you very much. I have no public speakers, so any non-cabinet member wish to speak? Councillor Condacor.
17.5 years ago, I came to this council for the very first time for a meeting on the waste strategy. This producer responsibility stuff is really welcome and should have been happening years ago. And one of my main things we should be doing is getting on with it as a country and as a government. I'm really pleased that people are supporting the deposit return schemes, but we need to do it quicker. And I mean, Scotland's now about to launch their scheme. And we do need to include things like glass in it. Because when you look around, I'm sure it's in everyone's ward, there's litter from school children, from drunks, all sorts of people are just chucking bottles all over the place. A lot of them find their way into our watercourses and then into the Anchor and then into the sea. So this deposit return stuff is really, really important. I do hope the Waste Partnership, which this council is a part of, will really push. This isn't just another consultation, but actually this very, very long overdue deposit return scheme gets going, because our rivers are choked with litter, and you see some of these bergs they have out and sea of plastic. So we really need this to happen. We really need to include glass, and I'm really pleased we're getting our new recycling plant in Coventry, which we're part of. That will mean all the councils in Coventry and Warwickshire will have the same recycling, hopefully. And so I always say, as part of this, we also need the education so people use these systems properly and they don't put in the wrong stuff. Yeah, you put in a Pyrex dish into glass recycling and it doesn't melt at the same temperature of the bottles. So we really do need this waste strategy for the nation and for Warwickshire and for the borough all to work and to push the education. Thank you, Chair.
Any points of clarification on what Councillor Condacor has said? No. Any cabinet member wish to speak? No, in which case we will move to the recommendations. All those in favour, please show. Okay, that is carried. Thank you very much. That moves us on to agenda item number 11, which is recommendations from overview and scrutiny panels. There are none. Item number 12, which is any other items. I've not been made aware of any. That moves us to agenda item number 13, which is exclusion of the public and the press. So I will move the recommendation as printed under section 100A subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, in that the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item, it being likely that there will be disclosure of exempt information of the description specified in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act. And I have one public speaker on this, which is Mrs. Condacor.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to say that it's actually really disappointing that there's absolutely no information as to what's in these reports. I understand that if there's financial stuff and what have you, it can't be, you know, done in public. But it'd be nice that there's some sort of slight hint to the public. But both these things are leisure things on the side of town where I live. And it'd be nice to know, I have no idea, the E-Tone, whether you're carrying it on as is, whether you're cancelling it altogether, who knows? And it'd be just nice to know some of these things before they happen, before decisions are made, so that if there is something that, you know, public aren't happy about, they actually have a chance to say something rather than it being a done and dusted deal. Thank you.
I'll come on to it in a minute. Any non-cabinet member wish to speak? No? In which case, I'll address Mrs. Condacor's point head on. And in fact, oh, sorry. Sorry, Councillor Croft, do you wish to second that? Okay, thank you. And I think Mrs. Condacor actually answered part of her own question, and that she mentioned the word confidential. And that is exactly what this is about. And I would refer her, and I think she might have been there. If not, I apologise if my memory is out. But I referenced it in my response to Mr. Margrave at a full council a few months ago. But I'll put it on the record for anyone who is watching, and indeed we have members of the public in the gallery. We move into confidential session where there are items which could, if made public, put our negotiating position at risk, put our contracting at risk, or affect the employment of one of our members of staff. Now, I ask anyone in this chamber, and I include myself in this, if you have ever been employed, do you think it is right and proper that the terms of your employment are open for public discussion for all and sundry to see? It wouldn't be proper and appropriate. That is between you and your employer. And that is exactly what we are doing here. And if we publish too much information, then there is a risk that our negotiating position could be undermined and we would not get the best deal financially, culturally, whatever, in the best interests of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And that is why, precisely, we move into confidential session. And I put that on the record for everyone to see, because this isn't us with some kind of conspiracy theory, as some people have said. This is following due process to protect our interests as a council and therefore the interests of the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. So having said that, I hope members of the public, whether you agree with it or not, at least understand the reasons behind it. Can we therefore move to the vote on moving into confidential session? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Can I ask the members of the public to please leave the chamber now and for us to stop the live stream? Thank you.